Hi guys, I'm really grateful to everyone who has subscribed to my channel so far and regularly listens to my stories. 34 subscribers in a month might not seem like much to some, but I'm truly thankful to everyone who supports my work. Today, I've prepared a story for you about a psychopath who got rid of a blind old lady's dog so he could lick her hand in its place. Before I start telling you the story, I kindly ask everyone who hasn't subscribed to my channel yet to do so now. Like the video so the channel can grow and reach a larger audience with these stories. Some of you might have seen the news about the strange incidents in Iowa, but what you don't know is how it all started. My grandma Helen lived alone in a small apartment complex on the outskirts of Cedar Rapids. She'd been blind since before I was born, but she never let that stop her from living independently. Her only companion was this big German shepherd named Max, the sweetest service dog you could imagine. That dog was her eyes, her protector, and her best friend all rolled into one. Max had this routine where he'd come lick her hand whenever she called him. It was their special thing, you know? Like a constant reassurance that he was there, watching over her. I used to visit them every Sunday, but college and a new job in Des Moines meant I hadn't been around for almost 2 months. Looking back, I should have made more of an effort. Maybe I would have noticed something was off before everything went wrong. It was a Tuesday night when I got the call from Mrs. Rodriguez, the neighbor from apartment 4B. She was hysterical, talking so fast I could barely understand her through her thick accent. But I caught enough to know something had happened to Grandma Helen. I rushed as fast as I could between Des Moines and Cedar Rapids that night. When I got to Oak Valley Apartments, there were police cars everywhere, their lights painting the brick walls in alternating red and blue. The air felt heavy, like right before a storm, but the sky was clear and full of stars. Officer Jenkins met me in the parking lot. I still remember how he wouldn't look me in the eye when he started explaining what they'd found. The details came in pieces, each one worse than the last. Grandma Helen was okay, physically at least. But Max, what happened to Max was unthinkable. The police had their theories about what happened that night. They talked about break-ins and dangerous individuals, but they weren't there when Grandma Helen told me her version of events. Her unseeing eyes wide with fear as she gripped my hand so tight it hurt. She told me how it started normally enough. Around 8 p.m., she'd called for Max, like she always did before bedtime. When he didn't come, she wasn't immediately worried. Sometimes he'd be deep asleep or distracted by something outside the window. She called again and again. Each time nothing but silence answered. Then she felt it. The wet, warm sensation of a tongue dragging across her outstretched hand. But Max didn't bark his usual greeting. There was no sound of his tail thumping against the floor, no familiar weight of his head pushing into her palm for pets. Just that single, long lick and empty air where his body should have been. Max wasn't just some pet. He was my grandmother's guardian angel, a constant companion for 8 years. He was the gentlest soul you could imagine, always watching over her, always there with that reassuring lick of her hand. The thought of his final moments the pain he must have endured trying to protect her. It breaks my heart. But what terrifies me even more is knowing that after Max was gone, something else was in that apartment with my grandmother. Something that chose to mock their special bond in the cruelest way possible. I keep trying to make sense of it. If it was human, some disturbed person who had been watching them, they would have known how much that hand-licking ritual meant to my grandmother. They would have seen it happen day after day, time after time. But what kind of person would use that knowledge to create such a twisted moment? To take something so pure and loving and turn it into something so horrifying? The more I think about it, the less sense it makes. My grandmother's hearing is incredible. It had to be after losing her sight. She can hear a pin drop across the room. She knows every creak in that old apartment's floors. Yet she heard nothing approach her, no footsteps, no breathing. Nothing at all until that warm, wet touch on her hand. Could someone really move that silently? Could they control their breathing that perfectly? And why take such a risk? They were already in the apartment. They had already hurt Max. Why not just leave? Why reach out and make that contact? Unless whatever was in that apartment wasn't human at all. The thought makes me sick, but I can't shake it. What if the thing that hurt Max, the thing that reached out to my grandmother, was something else entirely? Something that could move without sound, that could perfectly mimic a dog's loving gesture. But that's almost worse to contemplate. Because if it wasn't human, if it was something else, then it's still out there, still hunting, still finding ways to twist the bonds between people and their beloved pets into something unspeakable. The police have their theories about break-ins and disturbed individuals, but they weren't there when my grandmother described that moment to me. The way she shuddered when she recalled how warm and wet that tongue felt. Exactly like Max's usual greeting. How it wasn't until her hand found empty air, where his head should have been, that she realized something was horribly wrong. What was it that reached out to her in that moment? What kind of entity would choose to announce its presence in such an intimate, mocking way? And perhaps most terrifying of all, why did it choose to let her live? In the end, we never found out what happened in that apartment. The police closed the case, unsolved break-in. But that explanation falls apart when you really think about it. Here are the facts we know for certain. A blind woman's beloved dog was taken from her in a locked apartment. No doors or windows were forced. No one heard any struggle or barking. And in those moments between Max's death and the discovery, something chose to reach out and touch her. The implications are terrifying. Either we're dealing with a human predator, so skilled they could move in complete silence, somehow knowing exactly how to get in and out without leaving a trace, or we're facing something far worse, something that doesn't need doors, something that can mimic our pet's most loving gestures. My grandmother moved in with relatives in Boston after that. She never got another dog. Sometimes late at night, I hear her whispering prayers in Lithuanian, ancient words passed down through generations, to ward off evil. She won't tell me exactly what she thinks was in her apartment that night, but she did say one thing that chills me to the bone. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones that hurt us. They're the ones that take their time to understand us first, learning our habits, our comforts, our rituals, and then they use that knowledge to get close enough for a taste.